Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming, appearing. Like I said, it really made my day, made my evening. I didn't know how many people would come, but I'm so happy. To be honest, this is the first time that I've done a webinar of this nature, and I'm just happy that there's a group of friends to kind of cheer me on through this presentation, and I hope that we'll have some nice discussion feedback afterwards. So, yeah, who's this program for? Spirit, well-being in spirit love. It's actually for people who are interested in questions, like fundamental questions. Who am I? What's my original nature? What's my engagement? What am I supposed to be being? What am I supposed to be doing? And where can I find my highest well-being? These are fundamental questions for human beings. And then how can I explain to others? Because we want to help everybody, or as many people as possible. So one thing, especially in the Krishna tradition, we have very deep insights, but it's not always easy to explain those insights to people who are not familiar with our tradition. So how can we make this available, make it accessible? And then we see that society is going down the tubes. It's in very bad shape. So what is wrong? What's the fundamental problem? And what is the alternative? So in other words, this program is really for conscious visionaries. People who do have a vision of the future, who want to make a positive difference in the world, who realize that we have to go to the root of the problem. They can see that the root of the problem is atheistic materialism. And then there has to be a root solution. So to counteract or combat or supplant atheistic materialism, we need a spirit-based alternative. That much is clear. But then questions arise. What is spirit? How does it work? How do we work with spirit? And then what is this spirit-based alternative? And then another question is, how can we explain these things without religious doctrine? Because spirituality is one thing, but religion, although it's sometimes, often, a foundation for spirituality, it's also often a cause for conflict and atrocities. So how can we do this without religious doctrine? Something that's common to everybody. Everybody can accept this. And how can we explain this simply to our people, whoever we regard as our people, whether that's a small group or a large group or society as a whole? These are some questions that come up. So spirit, well-being in spirit love is part of a program which at the moment I'm calling Spirit Synergy Leaders. And it comes in 3 parts, which are really 3 transformations of wisdom consciousness. First one is this, well-being in spirit love. And it's explaining, helping to understand and realize what is wrong with materialism, how the Vedic wisdom provides a true, clear, undeniable alternative. And then the second part, the second transformation, is well-being in spirit wholeness, which is spirit-based personal development. How can we integrate spirituality with success? It's not that spiritual people should be practically apathetic or inactive. They should be very successful. And then the third part is well-being in spirit synergy, which means how can spiritually awakened people, competent people, how can we best cooperate with each other? How can we have groups of spiritually awakened people in synergy with the divine, for us, the super soul or Krishna, and in synergy with the divine plan? So that's the whole Spirit Synergy Leaders. And this webinar program is just a brief look at the first part, which is well-being in spirit love. So first of all, in order to erect a new building, a new project, we need to demolish the old. And in order to come to a spiritual, an effective spiritual conclusion, we must demolish the material conception, which is the cause of so many problems. The ideal in society is that everyone gets an opportunity for comforts, support, and what they need for self-fulfillment. Everybody. But actually, we see that this doesn't happen. Ideally, everybody should get that opportunity. But what we see in material society is that wealth opportunities are being transferred more and more from the majority, from the public, to a very small elite who are not necessarily qualified to lead in any way. Can you turn off can you mute your microphones, please, until you actually ask questions, because there's some kind of heavy breathing noises coming on. So this is actually inevitable. This problem is inevitable in material society because material society is based on material science, and material science gives power. And as it said, power tends to corrupt. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. So the tendency in material society necessarily will be, that those who have power from material science and technology will be corrupted, and the leadership positions will attract corrupt personalities. So material society has this problem baked into it. So it's ineffective, and it leads to poverty and all sorts of abuse, social abuse. What do materialists believe? Only matter exists, only physical laws act. The universe appeared causelessly in a big bang. And then the formation of the universe proceeded simply according to physical laws. Conscious life is a product of matter. We are biological robots. The life is just a mechanism. And consciousness is also a mechanism in the brain. I remember when I was teaching in Cambridge, not teaching at university in Cambridge, but we had a society in the Cambridge University. So it was a really good friend, Scotty. He said, what you're saying is so beautiful, but I just can't believe it, because I know that we're actually just impulses in the brain. And many people have accepted this view of themselves, of ourselves, of themselves. Consciousness is just a byproduct of matter. And then physical laws have created life forms through the process of evolution. So worms and fishes, and you end up with human beings. In other words, evolutionists have evolved from worms. Worms have evolved from matter, and matter has evolved from whatever, emptiness, the Big Bang. So this material doctrine that there's only matter, it's a matter-only doctrine, it's obviously false. Why? Because we do what unaided inert matter cannot do. We climb mountains because they're there. We express abstract principles, abstract emotions in abstract symbols. Matter, inert matter, concrete matter cannot do these things. There's no way of talking meaningfully about that happening. Not only do we do what matter can't do, some people would say, yes, but AI can do these things, and that's just matter acting. But AI, artificial intelligence, took so much energy, so much creative intelligence to establish it. So people who put forward this view, they don't think that how much intelligence and energy went into creating the brains that could create artificial intelligence. Not only do we do what matter can't do, but we make what unaided inert matter can't make. We make beautiful architecture. We make space rockets, radio telescopes, beautiful pictures. The whole world of artificial objects, some of which are there only because they're beautiful, which is a subjective idea, and some because they're useful for various man-made artificial purposes. So we do what matter can't do, and we make what matter can't do, what matter can't make. So there's no way that unaided material systems or material laws can make systems that do what matter can't do. It doesn't make sense. It's a ridiculous idea. Not only is the material doctrine obviously false, but it's also meaningless. What does meaning mean? So for example, if I say, what is the meaning of a word? It means, what's the intention behind speaking that word? I can ask you, if you say something and I don't understand, and say, well, what did you mean when you said that? It means, what did you intend? So if there's only physical laws, then there's no intention. If there's no intention, there's no meaning. It's just things happening. Rain rains because it rains. Thunder thunders because it thunders. Planets go round, do whatever they are doing. Suns, galaxies do whatever they're doing because that's just physical laws acting. Which means that when people talk about materialism, that's also got no meaning. It's a self-destructive doctrine. And the whole of modern material society is based on this self-destructive doctrine. And we see what's actually happening, that society, because it's based on a self-destructive doctrine, is actually self-destructing. This is a problem. So atheistic materialism, it's destroying our environment. It's destroying our social structure. Because the family, the country, I mean, we see what's happening now, just right now, in the war between Ukraine and Russia. Not that that's the only war that's going on, but it's particularly in the news. How that has destroyed the whole social structure and makeup of the whole of Ukraine. Millions have been displaced. And the war, you can see on YouTube, you see forces destroying buildings. Those buildings were houses. They were where people lived. Where are those people now? Maybe dead, maybe in another country, the family dispersed. Also, material atheism, it destroys the intelligence, because in order to live in that framework, you have to accept nonsense as sense, and you have to accept sense, in other words, conscious common sense, as nonsense. It's extremely destructive, and it's destroying our consciousness, because materialists don't know about consciousness. So altogether, atheistic materialism is a train wreck. Well, we need consciousness. Why do we need consciousness? Einstein is quoted as saying, you can't solve your problems with the same consciousness you had when you made them. So the problem with atheistic materialism, it creates all sorts of problems, but it makes us unconscious. And since it's making us unconscious, we can't solve the problems that materialism makes. So it's essentially a degrading system, a degrading framework, necessarily self-destructive, destructive and necessarily self-destructive. We need consciousness. Actually, it's probable that Einstein didn't say that at all. It's a misquote. But what he really did say is that we have to find a new way of thinking if mankind is to survive and move on to new levels. And this new way of thinking must involve actual understanding of the real fundamental realities of life, of consciousness, and of matter. How consciousness can act in the physical world. So what we need is conscious wisdom. It's going to be very difficult to find solutions to the problem of materialism within a framework where everybody is thoroughly indoctrinated and programmed by materialism. So we need to go beyond that framework. We need traditional conscious wisdom. And the most authoritative, extensive, and probably the most ancient, like furthest away from this materialistic framework, is the Vedic wisdom. So Vedic wisdom enables us to create, not create, to show, to manifest an alternative. And to do this is, we'll accept 4 conditions for worldviews. And we're taking these actually from material scientists. The original material scientists were very original, very creative, out-of-the-box thinkers. And they put up these conditions and then neglected them. We're not going to. So here they are. First of all, whatever you're talking about, it's got to be in terms of direct experience. Whatever explanation somebody comes up with, we say, yes, okay, what are you talking about in direct experience? Oh, the basis of the world is electrons, protons, bosons, and Higgs particles. Okay, but what are you talking about in direct experience, in terms of direct experience? Second thing, has got to make sense. So materialism doesn't, material scientists, what they're talking about, the fundamental realities that they're talking about, actually, they don't experience them directly, and we certainly don't. It doesn't make sense, as I've pointed out. Now, the next thing is that the worldview has to be undeniable. Undeniable. Like, what's his name? Thomas Huxley, Darwin's bulldog. Or not Aldous Huxley, Thomas Huxley. So he said, he put forward this, he quoting Descartes. He said, the only thing that's reliable is that which you absolutely cannot deny. And then the fourth thing is, we accept unavoidable realities. Material scientists will not do that. They have a culture of denying what they don't like. What don't they like? Any idea that there's something supernatural. So we take these 4. Now, I want to point out how can we arrive at things which are true by direct experience and undeniable? And the Vedic wisdom gives it, it's got wealth. The Vedic wisdom is based on axiomatic realities. First of all, there's what's called Sankhya philosophy, 24 elements of our world of experience. Subtle sense objects, the qualities of matter, senses, mind, intelligence, false ego, the active senses, like that. 24 elements. Plus, the Atma, or the individual conscious self, is also axiomatic reality. And plus, supersoul is also axiomatic reality. And certain states of consciousness also. I want to go into this in sequence. So let's, when I talk about axiomatic realities, numbers are an axiomatic reality in arithmetic. You can't do arithmetic without numbers. But arithmetic doesn't tell you what numbers are. You can take a calculator and you can calculate all sorts of sums, but you can't calculate what is a number. You can't even ask the question. Similarly, form is an axiomatic reality for geometry. But again, geometry doesn't tell us what form is. You have to have an intuitive sense of form and be able to work with form in order to do geometry. So axiomatic realities, a system of knowledge can't describe its own axioms. The axioms are the foundation, and they're so fundamental that they're beyond the system of knowledge itself. Also, it can't explain them, where they come from. And the system of knowledge can't deny them either, because it's based on them. So the same axiomatic realities are so fundamental that you can't do without them. You can't explain them and you can't deny them. Srila Jiva Goswami, he put forward the principle of tattva. So he said tattva is that which is true by experience and you can't sublate it, which means you can't take it away, you can't put anything in its place, and you can't deny it. So wouldn't it be wonderful if the final, ultimate, fundamental axiomatic reality were love? not Higgs particles, not bosons, not electrons and proteins, but love. And the Vedic wisdom tradition points out that actually this is the case. And now I want to go through this, just take a deep dive into consciousness. Scientists have a hard time with consciousness, naturally, because they're hypnotized into thinking that everything is just objects, and consciousness is an object that they can't understand. Consciousness is not an object. Consciousness is a subjective reality. It's a subject reality. And their object knowledge can't tell them about the conscious subject. It can't tell them about subject realities. So consciousness is not an object in the world around us. I mean, just think about that. The world around you. Just have a look round at the world around you. Are you part of the world around you? No. Can you be? No, because it's around you. You're in the middle of it. It doesn't make sense. So consciousness is not an object in the world around us. It's the means, it's the medium by which we're aware of the world around us and by which we interact with the world around us. So materialists, not only do they not understand consciousness, they don't understand why they don't understand consciousness. And to go further, they don't understand why they don't understand consciousness. And the reason is because they've hypnotized themselves into thinking that their objective knowledge is all sufficient, necessary and all sufficient, and it answers everything. And it doesn't. It doesn't. Objective knowledge does not tell us about the conscious subject or the super subject. So first of all, what do we mean by when we talk about consciousness? Okay, conscious abilities. We have the ability to act intentionally. Matter does not act intentionally. Sticks, stones, waterfalls, they don't act intentionally. They act according to the physical laws. But we have goals in mind. Small goals like getting up, making a cup of herbal tea or whatever, and large goals, life goals. We're moving intentionally towards a desired result. Desired. And that desired result should give us a better quality of life. So then intentional activity, and then sense perception. We see, we touch, we taste, we smell, we hear. These are experiences, qualia, technically. Your vision is not a physical object that science can investigate. Can you see your vision? Can you weigh your vision? Can you measure it with a ruler to see how long it is, how hot it is, how fast it's moving? Excuse me, it doesn't have any of these physical properties. And then the third thing is we have mental process. We think, we feel, we desire. These, so material science sees physical objects, but it can't see subjective reality. It's impossible. It's a totally false procedure. It's a totally false outlook to think that that's possible. Can you see your vision? You can see objects, but can you see your vision? Can you hear your hearing? No. Now, if somebody says conscious abilities are not fundamental realities, you see, Vedic wisdom says that these are fundamental realities. They're not derivative. They're not something that's been added onto matter by evolution. Now, supposing somebody says, nah, that's all rubbish, Vedic poppycock. Conscious abilities are not fundamental realities. But then that means that they're implying what they deny, because in order to deny the fundamental reality of conscious abilities, it implies some kind of perception. Somebody's going to hear you, and you've heard about conscious abilities. It implies mental process. You've got to think about consciousness, and you've got to think about what a fundamental reality is. And then it involves purposeful activity, because you're speaking. So the denial implies what it denies. So conscious abilities are validating realities. They're axiomatic, fundamental axiomatic realities. Now, the next thing, I see, I act, I know, I feel. So there's a conscious self who not only experiences, but we direct our abilities, like we focus our eyes. We direct our activities. So what is this I? This I is the conscious self. And René Descartes, he said, so I think, therefore I am, cogito ergo sum. I can doubt everything, but I can't doubt that I'm doubting. Something has to be there that's doubting. So therefore, you can't doubt the existence of the self. And he said that the soul is a non-physical entity that acts on the brain, on a particular part of the brain. He thought in the pineal gland. And I'll come on to what modern science says about that. So his view was challenged, for example, by David Hume. David said, I can't find the conscious self. People talk about the conscious self, but whenever I try to find the conscious self, all I find is some particular thoughts or feelings. So I don't believe there is a conscious self. But who's that I who's looking for the conscious self? Who's that I who only finds feelings? Who's that I who doesn't believe that there is a conscious self? That is the conscious self, which we define as, what directs and coordinates our conscious abilities. So somebody says the conscious self doesn't exist. That means I don't exist. So who just said that? Someone can say the person, that means it's like saying the person who's talking to you doesn't exist. Okay, well, if you don't exist, why should I listen to you? End of discussion. Now, modern science, wait, sorry, I missed that one. Wilder Penfield, that previous one, I don't know how to go back. Wilder Penfield is a disciple or a student of Sir Charles Sherrington, who was a dualist. So Wilder Penfield said that there's two entities. There's the mind and there's the brain, and they're separate. You can't say that there's only one entity. He showed this clearly he's a neurophysiologist, brain surgeon. And he showed that clearly by his experimentation. Then another student of Sherrington, Nobel laureate Sir John Eccles. So he demonstrated very, very clearly that the self is a non-physical entity that interacts with the body through the dominant hemisphere of the brain. So he wrote this book, How the Self Controls Its Brain. And he wrote a book with Sir Karl Popper, who's a very prominent philosopher, The Self and Its Brain, the two of them together. So this is Sir John Eccles. He said we're a combination of two things or entities, our brains on the one hand and our conscious self on the other. Nobel laureate. And someone commented on his work saying that his work on the brain shows that the mind or intention is more than physical. The mind is to the brain what an archivist is to a library. The former is not reducible to the latter. So an archivist can go looking, just like the mind, the conscious self, can go searching amongst the circuits in the brain and find particular memories or whatever, thoughts, feelings. But the self is not just a sum of the feelings or thoughts and feelings. So the conscious self is axiomatic and self-validating. It's self-evident by direct experience. And if you try and deny it, the conscious self is involved in the denial. It's a fundamental axiomatic reality. So now another question comes up. We want a better quality of life, but what is the quality of life? We've just talked about what consciousness does. So what is consciousness? Oh, I don't have a slide here. So consciousness boils down to the essential qualities of consciousness: being, knowing, and loving. We exist as personalities throughout time. I was 5, I was 10, I was 15, I was 20. The factual existence of my conscious self does not change with time. And then knowing. We have knowledge and we want more and better knowledge. And that knowledge should give us more and better well-being, enjoyment, happiness, satisfaction, and fulfillment. So we can say being, knowing, and loving. This is the actual quality of life. And everybody, from trees to human beings, want more and better being, knowing, and loving. But human beings can go beyond creature comforts to get better being, knowing, and loving by philosophical inquiry and spiritual exploration. How do we typically find better being, knowing, and loving? In relationship, in communities and groups. Surveys showed that stable relationships are the #1 priority and very, very difficult to find. Relationships, we can say that it's interactions that affect our being, knowing, and loving, hopefully for the better, not always. Toxic relationships degrade our being, knowing, and loving. And positive relationships improve, enhance our being, knowing, and loving. So then we come, and we know when we're in a relationship. Now, somebody can say, relationships, that's not real at all, that's just abstract. It's real. Now we're talking, or I'm talking, you're listening. We're in a relationship. If you deny relationship, you're already in a relationship. It's self-validating. And when we go deeper into relationships, we come into love. Love means I find better well-being in helping others to find better well-being. And research shows, more and more research shows that helping other people helps the helper more than it helps the helped. Shoot, I just skipped another one, unfortunately. So that's love, getting our well-being by helping others to find their well-being. Then conscious love is helping others to increase the level of their consciousness. Just like parents love to help the children, authentic parents love to help the children grow up. They help them stand up, they help them to walk, they help them to talk, they help them to think logically, they help them to become effective human beings. This is conscious love. And in so doing, the parents also, their consciousness increases. So it's finding a new level of consciousness ourselves by helping others to find a new level of consciousness. Parents, teachers, mentors, all. Now, we can go one step further. Consciousness. What is consciousness, actually? Or what is spirit? You know, materialists hate this word, spirit. Something non-material, you can't investigate it. It's acting outside the physical laws, for heaven's sake. What nonsense. Nothing can act outside the physical laws. When we talk about spirit, we're talking about something that acts outside the physical laws, and it's timeless, it's eternal. You know, spirit is eternal. But then consciousness acts outside the physical laws because we do what matter can't do and we make what matter can't make. And consciousness is also timeless, in other words, eternal, because I was 5, I was 10, I was 15, I was 20. My mother, if she were alive, she could remember what it was like, what I was like when I was within the womb. And there's so much evidence for life before birth and life after death. Life separate from the physical body. So spirit and consciousness are actually two names for the same thing. But when we talk about consciousness, generally we're thinking about this in a kind of an everyday sense, and spirit means a more expanded sense. So consciousness actually equals spirit. It's the same thing. So we, you, I, we're body plus mind plus spirit. We're not material beings having a spiritual experience. Like, we're not material beings who sometimes have a weird spiritual experience, as the materialists would like to think. We're spiritual beings who at the moment are having a weird material experience, and materialists are making it weirder and weirder by the minute. So then we come to, since we've equated that consciousness and spirit, then we can come to spirit love. So spirit love means achieving our highest well-being in relationship with the divine, in helping all to achieve highest well-being in relationship with the divine. And we've seen, like my teacher, my Guru Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada, or Gurudev Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayana Goswami Maharaj. I mean, these are ideal examples. How much happiness they got, satisfaction they got in helping others to develop their relationship with Krishna. So clearly, I remember I've seen this video, Srila Prabhupada talking, maybe, I don't know, maybe at Gita Nagari or maybe in New Vrindavan, I don't know. And he's just explaining, you're not this body. And he's in ecstasy. He's actually in ecstasy, helping somebody to understand that you're not that body. So this is spirit love. So all of these are axiomatic realities. All that I've gone through, right? Conscious abilities, they're axiomatic realities, fundamental axiomatic realities, conscious self, being, knowing, and loving, relationship, community, love, spirit love. They're all axiomatic realities. And we've seen a system of knowledge. Any of our world knowledge can't explain the axioms on which our world is based. It can't explain them, it can't describe them, and can't deny them. So how can we account for that? Where have they come from? They can't have come from anything. So all we can say is that they're given with the system. The only reasonable worldview is that these qualities, conscious qualities, are present in source. In other words, all these qualities must be present in the source of life. So it means that source must be a universal conscious being with the same conscious abilities and qualities as we have, but universally. And not only, factually having consciousness, but the same states of consciousness, the same loving states of consciousness that we have, because that love, I didn't say before, but love, conscious love, it's an axiomatic reality, because without that love, we wouldn't be here discussing the meaning of life. We're only here because somebody loved us enough to raise the level of our consciousness. So source also has the desire, as we have the desire to enhance our being, knowing, and loving in relationship. So source has this desire to enhance being, knowing, and loving, its own, their own, being, knowing, and loving in relationship with us. So this divine being has manifested us for the purpose of spirit love. Just like parents manifest children, why? Ideally, so that they can get the happiness and satisfaction of raising the children. Raising the children, loving them, having loving relationships with them. That includes the desire to enhance its being, knowing, and loving in relationship with us by helping us to increase our being, knowing, and loving, ultimately to the level of spirit love. This is reasonable, with conscious energy. All energy has a source. So then conscious energy must have a conscious source. So it's a universal conscious being. Sir Roger Penrose is a Nobel physicist, very intelligent person, says, in short, what makes human beings human is not a material quality, it's a spiritual one, and it's clear that its source is an entity apart from matter. So he's talking about a universal, non-physical being as the source of life. Just briefly, it's one thing to say that, well, consciousness, the source of consciousness must be conscious. But how can matter come from consciousness? That's weird, if you think about it. How can chunks come out of consciousness? Consciousness is a non-material thing, non-physical thing. How can chunks come out of consciousness? Well, one thing is that we think that we're living in a world of objects. It's not true. It's not true that we are living in a world of objects. You put your hand out, you touch whatever, you touch your body, you touch the chair or whatever that you're sitting in. Really, strictly speaking, these are not objects. We're living in a world of conscious experience. We're living in a matrix of our own conscious experience. We have managed to make a sense of reality out of our experience, but we're living in our world of conscious experience and the sense of reality that we've created out of our, what we sense and what we think. So Krishna says, earth, when he says earth, water, fire, ether, these are my element, these are my energies. Earth means solidity, water means fluidity, fire means energy, air means movement, ether means space, and then mind, intelligence, and material, false ego. These are my 8 separated energies. Now, we see solids and liquids and light. We see things moving. We see that things are separate from each other. Okay. But what we don't see solidity. Solidity is like an abstraction. It's our impression from our various experiences. You throw solids, you fall over them, you bump into them, you move them around, and then you get an idea of what it means. Solidity, what does it mean? What does liquidity mean? What does energy mean? We don't see these things directly. Solidity, liquidity, energy, movement, accommodating space, they're abstract subject realities. And these are the basis of our world of experience. So what can maintain these universal abstract subject realities other than a universal subject? It makes even matter coming from consciousness, it makes sense. And this is also scientifically accepted. I don't know what was going on 100 years ago, but there was a flurry of deep insight into consciousness. Astronomers saying that the basis of the universe is conscious. Like physicist Max Planck, he's saying the basis of matter is consciousness. And also, Charles Sherrington was there. He was talking about the conscious self as well. So Max Planck saying, I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. He said that there's a universal mind that keeps every atom in motion. This mind is the matrix of all matter, he said. And then Sir Arthur Eddington, who was the one who performed the eclipse experiment that made Einstein's theory of relativity, brought Einstein's theory of relativity into publicity. He said the stuff of the world is mind stuff, similar to feelings in our consciousness. Sir James Jeans, a very prominent astronomer, about the same time, the universe begins to look more like a great thought than like a great machine. So it's both logically and scientifically reasonable to say that, oh shucks, the picture's missing. There's a nice one. There you go. God used beautiful mathematics in creating the world. Galileo, all the great scientists, Max Planck pointed out, there's no conflict between religion and science. All the great scientists have been deeply religious, deeply spiritual people. George Ward, previously an atheist, and he changed his mind completely. He said, mind, rather than emerging as a late outgrowth in the evolution of life, has existed always as the matrix, the source and condition of physical reality. That stuff of which physical reality is composed is mind stuff. We're living in a world of mind stuff. And that, I mean, it seems like an abstract conclusion. Actually, it's a huge jump in consciousness to realize that we are living in a world of Krishna's material energy, intimately connected with him. I just want to take a dig at evolution as well. So evolution, the fundamental assumption there is physical laws have created living bodies and they've improved them by the process of evolution. It's all going on physically. What's fundamental fact? We do what unaided inert matter can't do, and we make what unaided inert matter cannot make, starting with information, by the way. So how can physical laws create physical systems that defy the physical laws? It doesn't make sense. It's a useless, destructive worldview. That's one physical fact, fundamental fact. And then the second thing is physical laws don't make living bodies. They break them by decay. Like I remember when I was in Hawaii with Gopa, Bert Doherty there. So we found a dead pig. And that dead pig was smelling a long way away. Man, you remember? He's laughing. So immediately we die, the body starts breaking down. So why are our bodies not rotting off our bones now? Something is defending, protecting our bodies from the physical laws. What do we know that opposes physical laws? It's consciousness. So the most obvious thing is that universal consciousness is protecting our bodies from the physical laws. Our bodies shouldn't even exist according to the physical laws. Our bodies have been made by non-physical actions and continue by non-physical actions. You have a look at, they've got animations of what goes on inside a cell. It is awesome. It's absolutely awesome. It's amazing how those things work. These are not physical actions at all. So what's our highest well-being? Spirit love. Means achieving highest well-being in relationship with the divine, in helping all to achieve highest well-being in relationship with the divine. That's our highest well-being. And how do we get it? We find our highest well-being by taking part in sacred community dedicated to promoting spirit love. So, for example, the preaching movement, Lord Chaitanya's preaching movement, is sacred community dedicated to promoting spirit love. And we know that we can find actual, ecstasy and bliss and satisfaction, fulfillment by taking part in that. So what's the next step? The next step is to form a core group of people, devotees, who've understood and realized this reality, and are committed to making this wisdom available to authentic educators and leaders, not bogus material teachers and leaders and people who are leading society astray at the moment, to make this wisdom the basis of the new society. Not necessarily to reform present society. I don't see how that's possible. But we need to make nucleus of like a whole new approach to loving life and loving interactions. Dear friends, thank you very much for your time and your kind attention.